This is the build video for these two custom Lamarzocco espresso machines. There's actually another video where I briefly recap the build of these and then I deliver them to their new owners. It's really cute and they were super excited. You should go check out that video after you watch this one. But this is the step-by-step build of exactly how I built these two custom Lamarzocco espresso machines. I'll be including all my measurements and the process on how I built these, so you could pretty much make one yourself just by following the video, but I may also have plans available. These would make an excellent Christmas gift or gift to any espresso lover that has a child or small child that loves espresso. The espresso machine is a relatively easy design, and it is composed of 5 basic shapes, plus the accessories. Starting from the bottom, the 5 basic shapes are the square base, drip tray, middle section, group head, and the outer 3-sided trim to finish off the top. I'm sharing the dimensions I used, but you can make yours to whatever scale you choose. I used dimensional lumber to keep the build simple. The bottom square base measures 9 by 9 inches, made from 1 by 2s. The drip tray is 3.5 by 12 inches. I cut a notch along the inside top edge to hold the top piece of plywood or Lexan for the drip tray. The base has a 1/4 inch piece of cabinet underlayment material. The drip tray will get a piece of Lexan for the grate. The middle section of the espresso machine was cut out of a 1 by 8. The bottom of the middle section is about 9 by 9 inches to match up with the square base, but it angles outward toward the top, so the top dimension came out to an odd measurement of 10 1/8 by 11.5. You can't choose the top measurement, it is a result of the angles cut. Speaking of angles, the middle section was cut at a combination of angles that bent both time and space. The two cuts toward the back were mitered at a 45-degree angle and also cut at 10 degrees from top to bottom. This is so the middle section leans out and back from the base, creating that distinctive Lamarzocco profile. After these angles were cut, I ran the top and bottom through the table saw at 10 degrees so it would sit flat on the top and bottom. Next is the group head rectangle. I used a 1 by 4 for these pieces. This was 10 7/8 by 12 13/16. The dimensions of this piece can vary. I made this piece at a dimension where the skinny edge would rest on only about half of the top edge of the middle section. That way the other half, the outer trim piece, can rest on, and it would give a good gluing surface to both of those pieces, plus kind of hold the load. I also made the front long enough to hang over the drip tray, but cut about a 1/2 inch off the remaining portion that rests on the middle section. This was only done so it would resemble an actual espresso machine. The outer top frame was mitered on the back corners to fit the inner group head rectangle piece tightly. The side length of this piece was cut to stop at the front of the middle section. Now, depending on the thickness of the material that you use to cover the front of the middle section, this length could vary slightly. I used cabinet underlayment, which is pretty much a 1/4 inch plywood, for the front of the middle section. The chrome vinyl I used at first did not want to stick too well to the wood. It sticks much better to Lexan, so if your budget allows, I'd recommend using Lexan here too. I also found that the thicker vinyl looks and sticks much better. Now it was time for assembly. I'll start at the bottom again. The base frame and plywood surface are held together with only wood glue. The frame pieces were mitered at 45 degrees, and I used this cool tape trick to hold all the corners together as it dried. I glued and screwed the drip tray to the base, then drilled pocket holes in the base from the bottom side pointing upward. The middle section is held together in a similar process, where the mitered joints are just glued together and I used tape to hold it tightly. I also used 2 1 by 2 first strip pieces in the front. These are also cut at an angle slightly on both ends to match up with the middle section angle. Before installing the group head section, I made the portafilters, group head, and steam wand assembly. The portafilters were made from using a hole saw on a few pieces of scrap wood. The portafilter handle was made by turning a wooden dowel. I created this quick lathe jig and used it on the table saw. I highly recommend using an actual lathe. The method I used was very dangerous, but it worked. I do not recommend trying this at home. I slowly guided the spinning jig through the table saw, and I was ready to bail at any moment if it came apart. I cut a sort of dovetail into the handle to attach the second part. When gluing the two pieces together, I used a thin wedge to angle the handle downward slightly. After all the pieces were cut, I glued and clamped them together to dry. I used a water-based stain. The group head assembly was made from another piece of scrap wood, and I cut it to fit the portafilter profile. I carved out the group head so the portafilter would fit into it and turn about a half turn, just like a real espresso machine. This part was chiseled and dremeled. Another option here is to just use magnets. I used a metal construction strap to hold the air compressor fitting for the steam wand assembly. Using the tap and die was a bit excessive, but it worked. So the main bodies of the espresso machines are complete. Right now it's just finishing up the details. I'm working on the steam wand. I was trying to figure out a solution to get the steam wand slid over the air compressor fitting. That's going to let it swivel. Pretty excited about that. It's going to look really cool. But I was figuring out a way to expand the plumbing pipe to slide over the fitting, and it wasn't expanding enough, so I was going to grind down the fitting a little bit so the pipe can slide over it, and then I'll crimp it down so it doesn't go anywhere. So pretty soon I'll be done test fitting the details, the next few components, and then I'll be able to paint it and get it assembled. It's come a long way. It's taken a while, but we're getting closer to the end. Now, in hindsight, and if I had more time, I would redesign the steam wand a little differently. I was able to make the steam wand swivel much like a real espresso machine steam wand by using an air compressor fitting. The tube of the steam wand was a piece of 3/8 plumbing pipe used for sinks and toilet lines. I had to expand one end of the plumbing line and slip it over the compressor fitting, then I squeezed it back down around the fitting. I tried to put a nice S-curve bend into the tube, but it kept collapsing. Ideally, I would have used some type of bending spring and a different expander. Please leave any ideas for this in the comments below. Now I know I'm not the only one that's ever clamped a belt sander to a bench. I made a quick jig for the router table to cut the grooves into the knobs. I used a hole saw on a piece of 2x4 to cut out the knobs, and then free-handed the grooves on the jig. I cleaned up the grooves with sandpaper and beveled the front edge using a sanding block. The lever section was made from a piece of ripped 2x4. I used the bandsaw to cut the radius around the edge, then ran it through the table saw to taper the top and bottom. The lever handle was cut from a small piece of scrap. I sanded everything super smooth before applying stain and water-based poly. I cut more cabinet underlayment for the top and Lexan for the grate and drip tray. I gave everything a good sanding and blew off all the dust with compressed air before it was ready for paint. I repeated the same steps for the second replica. Before painting, I taped off the gluing surface where the middle section is going to attach. Wood glue and pocket holes hold the middle section to the base. My wife graciously helped cut the vinyl for the upper grate and drip tray using her Cricut. This part was actually pretty tedious, and I even had to redo a couple pieces. It really helped pull off the look, and in certain lighting it's even hard to notice the Lexan. The front trim was attached with stainless screws, much like the real machines. I added a couple real pressure gauges before attaching the top section. The top is held on with, you guessed it, more glue and screws. Getting to this stage was a lot of fun. As I added the accessories, it really brought the machines to life. I countersunk holes for the stainless Allen screws that attach the knobs. I pre-drilled all the holes before attaching the knobs. Here's a quick shot of the hardware I used. The Allen bolts and large front washer between the knob and the top piece are stainless. The smaller washer and the lock nut on the inside are not. I tightened them down just enough so they would spin freely. I attached a small piece of aluminum to the lever handle, then drove a screw up through the lever block through the aluminum. I used real LEDs but did not connect them to a power source. It would be really easy to add power or a battery and some type of switch if you wanted. Two mock boilers were created by wrapping aluminum foil around old insulated cups. I added a few copper accents for convincing. The top sections were attached with more stainless screws, and finally the logos were applied. Do you think the boilers were convincing? If you're familiar with the Lamarzocco Linea Mini, let me know how I did on these replicas. Be sure to check out the other video where I give these espresso machines to their new owners as a complete surprise, and you can see their reaction. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I'm looking forward to sharing the next project with you. Oh, this is going to be epic. Look at that. It's like an air mattress, foam mattress.